This Australian lady. She spent hours talking to people on their deathbed. And she wrote this book with the intention of bringing to light the most common regrets that she found from talking to all of them. This episode is going to be about the first regret. All right, welcome to Brolosophy. Here we go.
Episode 1, we are finally live, Mike.
8 years of us wanting to start a podcast, being little bitches, not doing it. Finally here, finally doing it. I'm pumped.
We're here. Yeah, this is probably going to be an atrocious episode. And we're probably not going to be good for our first 100, but determined to make this thing work, man. This has been our dream for a long time, and I have no doubt that in 10 years we're going to look back and this is going to be the greatest podcast on the fucking planet.
I like the confidence.
Absolutely, bro. One step at a time.
Speaking of confidence, for the 5 people that are watching or listening right now, we are the Fio Bros. I'm Mike Fio.
And I'm Nick Fio.
And we are brothers, business partners, and best friends. And our intention with this podcast is really simple. What is it, Nick?
We're just 2 brothers from Brooklyn philosophizing about life. We're both obsessed with this one question, which is, how do we live the good life,
a happy
life, a fulfilling one? How do we milk this one life that we have? And we're both really passionate about becoming the best versions of ourselves. And this podcast is a way to document our learning together and hopefully share it with other like minds and bring them into our circle so that we can all grow together.
Yeah. And the reason why we have this sign back here that says Memento Mori, which means remember you die, is because it's our core philosophy.
Yep,
right?
We got it. We both got it tattooed on our arms here.
And we remember that we die every single day. For what reason, Nick?
It strips away the bullshit and puts what's important at the forefront of your life.
Exactly. And that's the perfect transition into what we're talking about today in this episode. We just finished reading this book right here, The 5 Regrets of the Dying by Bronnie Ware. And we read it in our book club. We were both blown away by it. So we figured, let's talk about it. Let's share all the lessons we learned with other people, and hopefully they get some value out of it too.
With that said, let's jump right in, Mike. What is the first regret that we're going to talk about in episode 1 of Brolosophy?
So the first regret, Bronnie, the author, says is actually the most common regret, and it's this. I wish I'd had the courage to live a life true to myself, not the life others expected of me. And she tells this story of this woman that she met named Grace.
Say it one more time.
I wish I had had the courage to live a life true to myself, not the life others expected of me.
Okay.
So Grace, old lady, sweetheart, seemingly had an amazing life. She was married for over 50 years. She had,
I said, damn, that's a long time.
Yep. She had 5 kids. Those kids had kids. So she had beautiful grandchildren running around, spending time with her. And from the outside looking in,
the American dream,
you would think she, was happy. When Bronnie came into her life, she realized that this woman was deeply unhappy. And it was because she was living with this really deep regret because she spent 50 years of her life in prison.
Living a lie.
Living a lie, basically. She was married to an asshole, to put it simply. This guy made her feel like she was in a dictatorship where she couldn't do any of the things that she really wanted to do. And she never had the courage to leave this relationship. So later in life, this guy basically got so sick that he was sent to a nursing home. And so she, out of nowhere, felt like this sense of joy and freedom that she never felt in her entire life, almost as if her prayers had been answered, as messed up as that sounds. And she was happy, but it didn't last long because shortly after that happened, she was diagnosed with a terminal illness. And now she was dying. So
and ironically, it was caused by her husband, who was a smoker. So she died from the secondhand smoke that he had given her.
So her lack of courage literally killed her. And that's really what this first regret is all about. It's about a lack of courage to do what you know you really want or you really need, but not being able to take action on it because of the fear of what others are going to think of you, or just
Mm,
fear in general.
yeah.
That to me is what this one is all about.
It reminds me of that Marcus Aurelius quote that I love so much. It's he says, "It never ceases to amaze me. We all love ourselves more than other people, but care more about their opinion than our own."
Yeah. Yeah,
It's
it's good.
this is Marcus Aurelius, thousand what it
2,000 years ago.
2,000 years ago, and it seems like our society, our race, the human race, has been dealing with this concept of a lack of courage for a long time. Why do you think it's so difficult for us to have that courage?
Oh man, I think it really comes down to the story that we tell ourselves. Like I think about myself, and the reason I loved Grace's story for this regret was because I feel like it's one of the most common examples where we stay in a relationship that makes us deeply unhappy for years,
Yeah.
sometimes our entire life. Sometimes we never leave it. And we basically waste our entire life feeling this need inside to get the hell out of there, to do more with our life, but we never answer that call. It's like this little whisper. And
Mm.
I know you have had this whisper, have had this life
Yeah.
experience where we were both in relationships in the past that really didn't make us happy, really drained us of our energy. We had that whisper saying, like, what are you
Mhm.
doing? Get out of this.
Yeah.
And we just said, shut the fuck up. We just kept
Yeah.
pushing it down, pushing it down. And I think when
In a very Brooklyn way, we didn't have the balls
yeah, exactly.
to do what we knew what was right.
And if I think back to myself to answer your question of like, why didn't I have the courage for so long? It was because my story was if I left, I can't deal with that pain. I was scared of the pain that was on the other side of the decision I knew I
Yeah.
needed to make.
And the pain being like what other people would think of you.
Not really. I never really gave a shit too much about what other people thought of me. It's like one of my superpowers. But I think it was more so, you know what? Yes, because it was a lot of, I didn't want to hurt her. I didn't
Mhm.
want to break her heart. And I also knew that my heart would be broken because this wouldn't have been my first breakup. I
Yeah.
had another breakup before this, and that shit hurts, man.
Yeah,
It's
well,
like,
it's
it's like mourning. It's the same thing. You're
yeah.
losing someone that you loved.
It's this concept of attachment, and then
Yeah.
losing something that you become attached to is
So basically, I think all humans, at least from our research, or I call it me search, is
that's a good one. I like that.
I stole that actually from the next book we're reading.
Nice.
um, but yeah, it comes down to we're driven by pain or pleasure. And I feel like pain is the more powerful one that drives us. Like it's pain has way more pull on us than pleasure because I knew that on the other side of that breakup would be pleasure, would be the sense of freedom, would be like, I didn't know what exactly awaited, but I knew it was going to be good because I had this feeling, this gut feeling like this is not what is good for you. But the pain was so loud, it was so overpowering that I just didn't have the courage to see through the pain. I just couldn't see through the pain.
So we just bury it.
Just bury it.
Just bury it.
Yeah, because it's uncomfortable, right? And we hate being
And
uncomfortable.
we put on these like masks.
Exactly. So every day I would show up and pretend to be happy when
Yeah.
really deep down, whether I was at work or with my family, there was this thing literally eating at my insides. Like
Yeah.
it drained my energy, no matter where I was or what I was doing, because there was this like calling inside that was saying, this is not right. You know it.
Yeah.
What are you doing? And I would just shove it. Just shove it down. It's horrible.
You know, we both experienced this from a relationship perspective, and I think a lot of people have as well. But the other big area of our life, I think a lot of people experience it in, including ourselves, has been our careers or our jobs or
Work, yeah.
our work. And you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, we were in jobs we also hated, and it was the same thing. It's literally the same pattern over and over again. We were both commuting to shitty jobs that we didn't like, and it's that same feeling like, what are you doing? This
But
isn't what you want.
Even going back before that, though, and so the regret is that I wish I had the courage to live a life true to myself,
Right.
right? What got us to live a life that wasn't true to ourselves in the first place?
Our
Right?
parents.
What got us to get into at least for me, what got me to go work at this accounting job and study accounting in college, which was absolutely not true to myself,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It was me catering to the opinions of others.
Yeah.
Like I remember being in college, right? Freshman year, everyone has to take a psychology class, right? I take this psychology class and this professor starts talking. And for the first time in my life, I was exposed to this concept of the human mind and how it affects us and all these things. And he's talking about this experiment. I'm loving this.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm so excited. So I go home for a Sunday dinner now, right? Like on a weekend in college, I went away. So I come home, I started telling mom and everyone about this study that was done, right? On these rats and how it affected them and all this stuff. I'm getting all excited. And I'm like, I think I want to make, at this point, I hadn't declared my major. I'm like, I think I want to do psychology. And I remember mom being like, by the way, I love my mom and she has our best interest in mind, but she's also a mother and has her own shit, whatever. I'm like, I think I want to be a psychology major. And she's like, that's good, but like, there's no jobs in psychology. And this was like soon after, like,
Which is also not true, but whatever.
it's a harder.
There's no pension.
There's no direct line to a job like if you go in the field of accounting and business or law, whatever. Like there's or
Yeah, I think you
pre-med.
need to give people context on who our parents are.
Yeah, our parents are Italian immigrants, so they have a very traditional way, a very immigrant way of looking at the
Work.
world for their kids. It's like we came here to sacrifice, and now you go to school, work your ass off, get good grades, then get a good job and retire, and basically all for the concept of taking care of
And
your
keep
family.
leaving out the golden word that they literally are obsessed with.
What?
Pension.
Pension.
They love pensions, bro.
And
They
benefit.
absolutely love that word, pension.
And great benefits.
Pension. Oh, it's got a pension? Oh, it's great.
Great
That's all they
benefits.
care about is a fucking pension.
But yeah, so going back, going back to what I was saying, right? Like I had this calling inside of me, but then I heard mom's voice say that might not be a good idea. And I completely internalized it and made a decision based on it. Right. And then it went on to me going to work in a corporate job in accounting, which I fucking hated.
Yeah.
Thank God at some point I woke up and it had to be a painful experience that woke me up. But then I changed my life and I had the courage, thanks to joining forces with you, to actually quit our jobs and go down this new path that we're on for the last 8 years of this world of entrepreneurship, where I finally feel more alive.
Yeah.
And I feel like I'm on the right path.
Yeah. I have a question for you. Is there anything right now? So we talked about like that whisper, that feeling inside that like scratches at you and says like, what are you doing? What are you doing? Have you felt that recently about anything?
Of course, this podcast. It's like, it's clear as day. We've been wanting to do this podcast for 8 years. And we've tried it, stopped, tried it, stopped. And I feel like this is our moment where we finally have decided to take that leap of faith, have the courage to go forward into knowing that this is what we
Yeah.
really want.
So the second part of the regret, it's not just I wish I had lived a life true to myself. It's I wish I lived a life true to myself, not the life others wanted of me.
Mm-hmm.
So why have we waited this long to actually do this? Like what have we been scared of, basically? Do you think? Like, are we scared of what other people think?
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, there's a whole psychological thing about putting out content, right?
Yeah.
And it like we said at the beginning of this episode is probably gonna suck, right? Like we're
sorry.
We're gonna look back. No, but even for ourselves, we'll look back at this in 5-10 years, hopefully, and be like, wow, that was really atrocious, Nick and Mike, right? But it's what's necessary in order to be great at anything. At first, you need to just suck at it, right? In order to be great.
You know what is another common one now that I'm thinking? So we went through relationships, we went through work. What's the last bucket that's the most important?
Our health.
Health. I feel like we know so many people who just are on like a unhealthy track and they probably have that whisper like, what are you doing? What are you doing?
Yeah.
Like, you got to be healthy. What the hell are you doing? And they just shove it down. They just shove it down.
Yeah.
And they just don't have the courage to do the right thing, to do it, to listen to that whisper.
Yeah.
I feel like those are like the three most common areas of life where this like happens, where you're at the end and you look back and you're like, fuck, I wish I would have done things differently.
Yeah. So how do we bring this down to earth? How do we actually make this practical? Like if we at some point in our life once again feel that whisper and we're not taking action, or someone that's listening or watching this feels that way right now, whether it be their job that they fucking hate or their relationship that they know they shouldn't be in right now,
Yeah.
or quitting that vape pen that is just a pacifier for them and they know they shouldn't be doing it, but they keep doing it. How do we build the courage to actually take that step?
So I actually think the more important step, it's not necessarily building the courage, but it's more so mitigating the fear. That's more important.
Mm.
It's not about,
Fear setting?
yeah, I was going to say Tim Ferriss's fear setting exercise is a life changing exercise.
Tell me about that.
So it's basically an exercise where you put your fear down on paper. You imagine the very, very worst case scenario for what would happen if you made that decision. So you really come to terms with literally, like, think of the worst thing that could happen. And then you look at it in its face and you realize it's really not that bad. Like, and you start to do these exercises that Tim will guide you through. We'll put the link in the description to his actual exercise,
His
because
TED talk. Yeah,
his
there's
TED talk or his exercise, whatever, we'll figure it out. We'll put the link down below so that people can actually get the details of it. But in a nutshell, when you look at the worst case scenario and you realize that it's really not as scary as you actually think, that is what builds your courage, right? That's how you get the
Yeah.
courage to actually do it. And we did this when we quit our jobs.
Yeah.
We said, okay, we're going to run out of money, right? So then we said, okay, how can we prevent this? We have this much in savings. What kind of run rate does that give us? Basically, we got really practical with the fear. It wasn't just like some lofty fear and like
Yeah.
all mental. It was real. We made it real.
What's the quote by Seneca about imagination? We suffer more in imagination
Than in reality.
than in reality. I feel like that's exactly what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
It's like this fear that we have is all in our imagination. And this fear setting exercise that Tim talks about basically takes that shit out of our head, puts it on paper, and allows us to see it in an objective way
Yeah.
and see that this thing that we're imagining is actually not as bad as we think it is.
Mhm.
And on the other side of that fear is freedom.
Exactly.
It's freedom.
That feeling when you finally have the balls to act on that whisper
Yeah.
and get past that fear is like one of the greatest feelings of all time, personally.
Yeah.
I love that feeling. It's like the best.
I hear you.
You just feel so good about yourself, so free, and like you're on the right path.
Yeah. Well, on that note, let's wrap up this first episode of Brolosophy with a conclusion here.
Yeah, I kind of feel that feeling right now because we just bit the bullet and did this.
Yeah, we bit the bullet, but let's close it. Let's close it out. What do you got for us?
Basically, to make this practical, if you're listening and you have that thing inside that we talked about, that whisper that you know there's a change you need to make, identify it, write it down on a piece of paper, do the fear setting exercise, and have the courage to actually take that leap and do it, because you will go to the end of your life just like Grace, and you're going to regret it big time if you don't. That's my call to action.
Yeah, let's not die with regret number one here of I wish I'd had the courage to live a life true to myself, not the life others expected of me. Let's be true to ourselves.
Hell yeah.
All right, episode 1 in the books. Good shit.
All right,
bro.
stay tuned for number 2 coming soon.
Peace.